Hi, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Wherever you find us, whether it's a video or podcast on your favorite platform, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. You can also find us on major social media platforms. If you go to MiamiGhostChronicles.com, you can find links to the videos or MP3 files, which you can download and enjoy without commercial interruptions. If you're into classic horror, ghost, and adventure stories, I narrate Nightshade Diary, and you can find links at nightshadediary.com. If scary stories are your bag, and listening to encounters with cryptids, ghosts, dogmen, and other weird creatures sends a shiver up your spine, then go to supernaturalstorytime.com for links to our weekly podcasts. Noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird can be found at eerie.news or visit the Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at miamighostchronicles.com. Please subscribe to my newsletter on Substack. Just go to mppelliser.com for a link. I want to thank you for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi everybody, how's everybody doing? Good? Great. This week, this is my appearance on the night, the paranormal doctor, J.C. the Critchbaum, and the reason why I say that is I was lucky enough to get him. I interviewed him before he asked me to go ahead and go on his show, which is at Night Dreams radio show, and it was a great interview. I really enjoyed speaking to JC. In other words, being the interviewee instead of the interviewer. And I really hope you enjoy it because we spoke about a lot of interesting stuff. Because he has a very, very good history of paranormal research and working with people with paranormal troubles. Yes, there's always one in every crowd. As a matter of fact, there's several in every crowd. So again, I really hope you enjoy it because, again, it was a fantastic interview.
Was there an event or
Well, you know what? Believe it or not, I mean, I always, like a lot of people, when I was growing up, I used to read the Hans Holzer, because that back then, I was about the only person that was writing these stories. And then, they had all the typical shows out there, In Search of and all this. There you go, Hans Holzer. And he's got a lot of them. That's one of his big ones. I've got that one.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where I did a lot of research on it beyond just reading stories as to what really was causing. Because, a lot of these ghost stories, let's call them that, when you really get into it, you realize that it's some of it is not made up, but it's like it's lost in translation. And usually it was like a friend of a friend, like, please, I want you to come see this family. They're kind of worried. Something's going on. What do you think? You're very level-headed. And most importantly, you know how to keep your mouth shut. So it was one of those things where I first started out as, I'm going to tag along with you. And then it was like, wow, you really know how to talk to people and they want to, talk to you again. And like, in other words, no hysteria, because sometimes, unfortunately, people, if they've been having something malevolent, and I want to use that word lightly, they do not know what to do.
No, because, a lot of people and families, and you touch a good point, they maybe grew up, nobody had paranormal in their family, may not even believe in it. Then all of a sudden, it's in their lap and they've got to deal with it. So what do they do? Where do they go?
Right. And you know what? Believe it or not, sometimes they do have had problems, but they've just been pushing it away. And then something happens. There's some trigger, an event where everything ramps up. Whether they've been living there for years, and then they're like, hey, we were used to maybe hearing a far off knocking every once in a while, but nothing. And all of a sudden, things go crazy. And they can't figure out what's happened.
Right.
And what you mentioned, by the way, is very accurate. What sometimes you need to do is introduce an object that has got some type of attachment to it.
Right.
And that could change the whole dynamic inside a house.
And that brings me to another point. Sometimes it can be the littlest thing that could work as a catalyst that just opens up the whole Pandora's box of paranormal in your house.
Yes. And as a matter of fact, I'll tell you a quick story. This was really, really early when I was getting started. And I had some family members
They ended up buying this house. It was an older house, and the lady that lived there, she was very elderly, and she died, and she was like a couple of days there, dead in the house. And from what I understand, she really didn't have any family or anything, and she was pretty old, and like I believe in her late 80s. Bottom line, it took the neighbors and I think the mailman, because this was the time where mailmen, they would come and if you were grandfathered, then where they bring it to your doorstep to put the mail. On, if you had a mailbox hanging on the next to your front door.
Right.
So I don't know who it was, if it was a neighbor or the mail, but somebody said, hey, I haven't seen in the mails and it hasn't been picked up. Bottom line, they found this lady, she'd passed away. When they went in there, the family, I think, was in another state, which that happens a lot in Florida.
Yeah.
Especially many years ago. They were like, no, sell it. Apparently this lady, I want to say part of it, she was maybe a hoarder. I think the other part of it was that she got older and she just didn't have a way of getting rid of some of her things.
Right.
So they cleaned out a bunch of everything. And I want to say the house, it was built like after World War II, so it was late 40s was what it dates back to. And I had some family members that they kind of sold it at auction kind of deal, like a short sale. It was paid off. It was no bank had a mortgage on it. So when they went in there, everything had been cleaned out. And it was like a 2-bedroom. It was one of those starter homes, older starter homes. And they had just one daughter. They put her in the second bedroom. I want to say she was 10 or 11, 12, not even 12, I think. Well, this girl, she's fine. And all of a sudden, she starts having nightmares. And she starts like having like night terrors. This is from somebody that's never had this problem before.
Right.
And the mom, she says every once in a while she would see like a shadow flitting, but she really didn't pay attention to it. Nothing of that. And let's face it, they were very happy because they got their first house at a great deal. So it's like, I'm not going to find any fault with this. No way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So bottom line, to make a long story short, this really started ramping up with this kid. And she started like talking in her sleep. And they were like, they could not figure out. They took her to the doctor, and the doctor's like, there's nothing physically wrong with her. So I said, you know what? And I went through everything, everything. And I remember the closet in this girl's bedroom was an older closet, and it was wide, and it had deep shelves to the back. Like when you walked in, there was a shelf. That was all the way in the back. It was gloomy because this was an older home. This is like now, like you have the big, Biflex doors.
Right.
And I was like, because I remember I went to a room, a waiter, they asked me, can you come over? Of course the kid is not there. And I'm like, there's some, sure enough, I went in there with a flashlight, and all the way in the back shelf, there was this very little, music box. By the way, it was an older music box, but very typical, the ones with the little ballerina things.
Yeah. Your standard issue. Yeah.
Let me tell you something. I don't know how to make people understand that you can have an object that's so innocent looking, like a ballerina music box, give you the worst vibes. And it was stuck all the way in the back. And I guess when they were cleaning out the house and taking out all the stuff, they just didn't see it.
They didn't see it.
And they left it back there.
Yeah.
And I was like, could it be? It was like one of those things. So I went and I took it. And I remember I put it in the box and I said, you know what? This is, by the way, psychologically, this is very important. I put it away and I didn't tell anybody what I had found. Because you'd be surprised on a psychological level. Because I said, this might have nothing to do with it, what's going on. This might just be an item that was left behind. And then I remember I asked him, I said, look, do you mind if I talk to any of the neighbors? Because you could tell this was a neighborhood where people like stayed. Once upon a time, people used to stay a long time in their properties. And I had noticed like one time, one of the gentlemen, he was out there watering his plants out in the front yard. And I could tell he was older. And I was like, they said, yeah, well, sure enough. And I walked over to where he was. And he's like looking at me like, I said, look, I'm what, and I'm like trying to see like, how do I ease this without this person like spraying me with water?
Yeah, spraying you down with the hose.
That kind of deal. But
Yeah.
anyway, he was a nice guy, and one of these people that I want to say is like likes to wants to, oh, somebody wants to talk to me, okay. So I said, hey, have you been living here a long time? Same thing, he'd been living there for years. I think like 25, 30 years, forever. And I said, oh, my family, they bought over that farm. I said, look, did you ever? And he goes, well, and he looked at me with his face like he knows that you're asking me for a reason, right?
Yeah.
He says, well, you know what? My wife, when she was alive, used to be good friends with that lady that lived in there. And there was stuff going on in there because she was telling my wife. And I said, I thought it was some weird stuff because she got a lot of crap in there. So apparently, and I don't want to say it was a music box. Who knows what it must have been because of all the stuff that she had in there. Because like I said, she had some type of hoarding tendency about her.
Right.
Okay. And he goes, this lady, she just didn't have any place to go. She was stuck there. But something really, really had her scared. And she would talk to my wife. They would like talk over the fence and stuff. Something,
Yeah.
but she just had no place to go. Her family is in another state, whatever. And I said, okay, thank you. He kind of confirmed for me what I knew in a way. And let me tell you something, the vibes in that closet, JC, were like that. It was like, when your hair stands up on your head and the back of your neck.
Oh yeah.
And you're
Yeah.
like, it wasn't, by the way, it wasn't like, how can I say, it's not like because it's a cold spot. It's like you're in the presence of something. And so what I'm getting to is that what was attached to that music box was not residual. It was
Okay.
something, act, whatever. So
Yeah, that
I
was
took
a-
the box and I didn't say anything to them. And I remember like a couple of days later, they called me up and, because this was like a cousin of a cousin. She's like, what, did you do something when you were here? And I said, why are you saying that? She goes, after you came that day, nothing's happened. The daughter, everything is fine. She's sleeping great. Oh yeah, because that was another thing. The kid was to the point, besides having the night terror, she didn't want to sleep in her room. They were like pulling their hair out. That she's fine. She
Yeah.
slept through the bed. And then I said, well, guess what? This is what I found.
Yeah.
And I remember I said, look, I can bring it over and you can say, they're like, no. Don't,
Yeah.
don't bring that back.
Yeah.
and I
Bring
said-
it on over, Marlene.
No, I
let's
said,
play
you want
with
me? I'll
it.
bring
Yeah.
it. I said, I don't know. I didn't bring it back. As a matter of fact, I went back one more time and I did like a blessing on the house, like and everything. And, we walked through there and smudging and holy water and everything. And I walked back in the closet. There was nothing there. Nothing. And my point being, I got rid of it the right way, of that music box.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to assume that she did have other things there that were, and I've kind of felt sorry for this poor lady who maybe spent the last years of her life trapped in a very haunted house. And she just didn't have anybody to help her out.
Right.
And I don't think she was there. I just think, she just died an older lady. But my point being that even the most innocent looking
Yeah.
object
Yeah.
can and this poor kid was being triggered because she's sleeping right outside this closet.
Yeah.
What was attached to it, God knows.
You never know. And that's great validation. You remove the object and everything went back to normal or what it should be for the family there. And
Right.
and that's what I always tell people, because Eric, even I do it. That's what I've been doing for years. Go to auctions, yard sales, or whatever, or flea markets. I love that stuff, antiques and things. But if I'm in doubt with something or it doesn't feel right, I leave it out. One time me and my sister likes doing it too. We're at an antique shop uptown, just a little mom and pop's thing, and she was looking for an antique little dresser to put in her bedroom. We walked by one and she stopped. She's got a little bit of abilities too, and she walked around a little bit. She goes, no, I'm not buying, I'm not taking that home.
Yes.
What's wrong? But yeah, I can feel it too. You never know, what it is. Some stuff's just got bad mojo or spirit.
Something I know it's residual is something that was
Yeah.
used. You could get a little feel for something, but it doesn't really like wig you out.
Yeah.
It's when there's something. And you know what? I want to say people don't realize there's people that their personality, they're just possessive of their material things. To us, maybe it's like, oh, okay, well, some people, their personality is, it's mine, that kind of thing. Or if it
Yeah.
was their favorite, whatever.
I know. Marlene, I got to say, I didn't realize it today. I talked to you earlier about it,
Yes.
but the first episode ever of Paranormal Survivor. I remember watching it plain as day, and I loved that episode because there was a haunted car. I didn't realize that was your husband, and that was
Yes. Yes.
you. Tell us about that. That was an amazing story.
Well, you know what? He got that car before we met, and it was really he. Like I said, he wanted to get a muscle car because when he was back in the '80s, he had his not only a Camaro, it had to be that type of Camaro. That was the. So he went off and he got it, and he found it at a very good price, very low mileage for how old I think it was in '88. I think it was in '88. We're talking he got it in 2011. Very low mileage. It had been kept in a garage, so it was everything.
Nice shape and everything.
Nice shape. He even drove it back from the west coast of Florida over to Miami, to the Miami area. It was great. And where he lived, he had bought a property. It was on 3 acres, and it was a very old farmhouse that he lived, which had been updated after Hurricane Andrew. So it was pretty decent. And there's a big porch area that spanned the whole back of the house. And he would park it there under cover because, of course, this is his baby,
Yeah.
Okay, So anyway, this house, of course, being an older farmhouse, it was lifted off the floor. It wasn't ground level. It was up on, it was a wooden 2-story farmhouse. And the bedroom where he was at, it was towards the back of the house. And he told me later on that at the beginning he would hear, it was all cemented, and he had a couple of stuff out there, and he would hear like noises out there, like something banging or hitting, like against the cement, but he didn't get anything. Around this time we're getting together, and the Camaro, everything. So his big thing was he would always go to the gym very, very early in the morning. And I remember I was back there, and one time he had those big metal rolling barbecues.
Oh yeah.
That a couple of times I heard what I thought was like the barbecue is rolling, like like clonk clonk, like metal against.
Yeah, that's a certain noise that you would
like
know.
If somebody pushes, and I was like, and I thought at the beginning, because normally he wouldn't take the car, but I said I know he would still drive it on off. I said, oh, he's back, okay, or he's coming in through the back.
Yeah.
And when you're half asleep and you're waiting for this person to arrive and they never do.
Right.
And I was like,
where are they at?
By the way, he had no animals. All he had were canaries. Okay, so he had no dogs, no cats.
Yeah.
Nothing like that. And I remember one of the times I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm getting up because there's something back there. And I go and I look in the back, nothing. It was nothing out there. And then it started to ramp up until finally I told him, look, let me ask you something. And he looks at me with his face like, oh man, I didn't want you to think I was weird. And he goes, yeah. And I was like, oh, really?
Really?
So it's like, so he used to be, a police officer up in New Jersey, New York. And he was telling me there were times where he would see, because it had like a big wraparound porch where, and by the way, this is western end of Miami-Dade County, which was totally rural. And this is where usually agriculture, everybody there was on 3, 4, 5 acre plots, but most of it was just fields. There was nothing out there. It was nobody could. Plus, he had built a big wall at the front of the house to get in there.
Right.
So one time, I remember he calls me. I'm working. I'm out on the road working, and he calls me. He goes, "Hey, you know what? I just saw somebody because he had big French doors at the front of the house. The entrance." He goes, "I just saw a guy with long hair walk across my porch."
Oh my.
And he goes, "I've got my gun." And I'm like, whoa. Because I'm thinking, okay, anybody really, at the end of the day, if somebody was really intent, anybody can jump a fence. How's that?
Yeah.
But by the way, both of his neighbors on either side were older people that he was like, there's nobody there. So he's like, I said, Henry, don't go out there. He's like, I'm going out there. It's like, oh, wonderful. And I know he's calling me just in case, hey, whatever's there. To be honest with you, he was not thinking ghost. He was thinking, I got some guy.
He's thinking of somebody.
Yeah, I was walking across, my porch, like on my porch. And it's like, well, bottom line, of course, he goes out there. There's nothing out there. There's nothing out there. And this was the first time I want to say he got a visual sighting of what it was, which was, he says it was a tall guy with long dark hair. And I remember
Yeah,
him telling me
seen
it
it.
looked like
Right, he'd seen him. He'd seen him. So yeah,
right.
so now
So I was like, and then after that, things escalated. And then I remember one time he came over to my house and he parked his car like right under the window of my bedroom on my house. And my bed, it was like right under the window to that front yard. And I had little dogs, and I knew my little dogs. My little dogs would only bark, and the way they barked, and I remember it was like about 2 or 3 in the morning, and I hear my little dogs bark a certain way, and I was like, oh. And I know he was always worried somebody was going to do something to his car, his baby, but I was like, okay, this is my home, whatever. So I remember I kneeled on the bed. And I'm looking out the window, and I see, like with the glare, kind of, even though it's nighttime, there's ambient, a little bit on the windshield, and I'm like, God, is that? I'm thinking I'm seeing movement inside there, but is that like the glare? It's like trees, the branch. I'm trying to like.
right.
And I'm thinking to myself, God, that looks like somebody sitting in that driver's side. And I tell people, when you're not really looking for it, you try to explain it.
Yeah, you try to explain it all
with everything.
Yeah.
And I remember he wakes up and goes, "What's up?" And I go, "Come here." And he, right away he gets up like,
"Get my gun."
Right, yeah, I know. And I didn't tell him, by the way, what I saw.
Right.
And he's like, "What?" Because, again, nobody's thinking paranormal. He's thinking somebody's running into the car. And I said, "What do you see?" And he's like, "This, like," and he goes, "Is there somebody in there?" And I looked at him and I go, like, "That looks like what?" Because I could tell it was like it was like somebody was sitting in the driver's side.
So you're seeing what looks like a figure sitting in.
Yes, it wasn't like, and sure enough, he got his gun and he runs outside. I'm like, there's Henry. He's old. And he runs out there and he wigged out because he saw the guy sitting when he came up to the driver's side window. Because remember, these are older cars. There's no fob to click it open. You have to like put a key to open the door.
Yeah.
Kind of deal.
Right.
He wigged out. It was the same guy. He says it looks like the guy
he saw earlier.
That he saw earlier. And that's when I started realizing, oh crap, this thing is the car. This is not your house. Because we were already thinking, is there something going on with the house since it had been built like in 1920, around that time, that farmhouse? Again, we're getting to the object thing where sometimes people think it's the house and it's not the house.
Yeah.
And that's when and it took off from there and then he used to have a mechanic that, since it was a muscle car and he had to special order parts for it, he would have to leave this car there sometimes days till the part came in and the guy would install it for him, the whole 9 yards. And finally one day, I remember, by the way, it wasn't cheap work because it did happen twice. The guy told him, "Look, Henry, I hate to tell you, but some of my guys don't want to work on this car. I've been working I've been going like under the dashboard, and I'm thinking I've got one of my guys hovering over me in the back. And when I look, there's nobody there. Same thing.
So even the mechanic is
having a problem. Then another time we took it, by the way, and we're like, I remember we looked at each other with his face like, and the same thing. He got somebody to put in a special stereo. And again, you remember these things are all in these types of cars. It's under the dashboard, the wiring and stuff. These older cars. Yeah. Same thing. And we ended up, and I was like, you know what? And I did have people that knew people, and I didn't want to. So I said, look, I was already involved in paranormal work, but I said, I don't want somebody to come out here and I want to get somebody that doesn't know who I am or what I do or anything. And sure enough, we were able to bring this guy who came over. And again, this is how you really tell. When he came over, you would think, oh, he's going to head straight for the house because it's an old wooden house. He made a beeline for the car.
Wow. Hey, Marlene, I got to stop you right there. We got to take a commercial break. When we come back, we're going to find out what the investigator found out when he came for the first time to the house to inspect the house, or was it the car? Yes. Don't go nowhere. Marlene was telling us about, a haunted object, which happened to be an Alley Rock Camaro that her husband, or future husband, had bought at the time, and they both had witnessed a spirit. She had seen one inside the vehicle. He had witnessed it. He had witnessed what looked like the same person in their back patio. So now, on top of this, the mechanics that are working on the car, they're having experiences also. And so now what happened, Marlene?
Well, by this time, I really didn't I didn't look for a psychic group because I knew there's something going on. I wanted somebody that was, had some type of psychic, notion, but I just wanted to see if they would cue in on something. So of course it was somebody that didn't know me, somebody that didn't know anything about us, didn't know I was a paranormal investigator. And like I said, the house we were in, it was a very old farmhouse, even though it had been renovated. But I'm thinking, let's see, this is where you find out who's who. If he's head straight for the house, but no, this gentleman, no, he went straight to the car, and he's walking around this thing, and I'm like, and me and Henry are like, I had told Henry, do not say a word, do not say anything. So we just looked at each other, and he looked at us, and he goes, hey. This is about the car, right? Because that was the thing. We didn't say ahead of time, hey, we have a problem with the car. We left it open-ended. And we looked and I said, well, why? What do you get? And he goes, oh, man. What? He goes, whatever's in here is violent. It's active. This is not residual. And he looked at us like, don't tell me this is not it. One of those things. And he was like, this is... And I said, well, what do you feel? And he goes, well, the feeling I get is somebody that was a very violent person when he was alive. I think he was killed around the car or in the car. But he goes, the feeling I get, even though it's not a motorcycle, is like somebody that was a part of a motorcycle gang kind of thing. That's the vibe I'm getting.
Yeah.
And I guess since this car was with him or something, he's attached to it. He's attached to it.
He loved the car. He loved the car.
Yep. And he is, and I said, do you think he was like, he didn't like those in the law enforcement profession? He goes, hell no. He was like, no. And I go,
and
well.
So, yeah, that's a double indemnity because.
Right, exactly. Well, because he used to, and he looked at him like, oh, And I mean, there was a lot of things that happened along the way, by the way.
Yeah.
And, as a matter of fact, when we would go travel, I have two older sons who I would leave to come and feed the birds. And I had one of them who at that time, he would do security and he would get done by midnight. And I would tell him, Andrew, when you get there to feed just sleep there. Don't. Later on, of course, nobody tells me this while it's going on.
Yeah.
He tells me, Mom, because afterwards we kind of told him, hey, this is going on. He goes, Mom, I'll tell you what, when I got there, I would always go in there and I would draw my gun.
He would draw his gun too, like following.
He would draw his gun. He says, I don't know. And he says, and sleep there? Are you crazy? Oh. No. I'd feed those birds and I was out of there. And then another time, my other son they would trade off like, hey, it's your day to go. Because this house was wood. So when you were upstairs walking, you could hear steps. If anybody was upstairs, you could hear a creak.
Yep.
And but my son Brandon, by the way, he's those people that are scared of clowns, but he was a brave guy. But it was like, anyway, he went during the daytime and tells me later, yeah, Mom, I was there. I was feeding the birds. And because my husband he was a bird breeder, a canary breeder. So he had a bunch of birds. He goes, and I started hearing somebody walking upstairs and I knew nobody was there. He says, Mom, for a minute there, I thought, Mom would have told me if somebody was here, like who's going to be there?
Right.
So he's like, and the stairs from upstairs, they would come down and empty out right next to the front door. It was because as people that have ever been in older homes, everything is narrow, Yeah. And he says he kept hearing it and it became more pronounced. He goes, Mom, when I heard that thing go out the hallway and come to the top of the stairs, I just threw water at the birds and I left.
He threw the water and it was out.
Like but I'm saying all these things we learned about it later.
Yeah.
And anyway, that we had to. By the way, it didn't resolve in the episode.
Yeah.
It kind of shows like it was resolved, but in reality, it wasn't.
No. Yeah, the car never ran again after it.
No.
Right?
No. We ran, but we got it fixed because
let's see.
Mr. Henry was not going to let go of the car.
Yeah.
You understand? So we got it fixed again. And then guess what? Whatever he had done, what it did was it bound it. It couldn't leave the car. All right.
Oh, okay.
Like before. Now, this is the thing. At that time, by then, we had got married. I'd moved in. I got chickens. We had dogs.
Yeah.
Guess what? No animal. None of the animals, even the chickens, would go near that car.
Even the chickens were chicken.
No, we had like a big rotunda in the front,
Yeah.
and we had it parked there. Every once in a while, we would park it in the front. I'm telling you, there's no animals. And those animals were all over the place. I remember he would run out and he goes, "That stupid chicken is on my other car. Get him off the car." You know, he'd be all upset. These animals, none. The dogs, they wouldn't pee on the, animals pee on the tires.
They knew.
They gave it a wide, wide berth.
Yep, they knew.
And finally, at when we were going to move up here in 2020, so he had it for like 9 years. He, by the way, we got it fixed more than once. And but that you can say, well, Marlene, you're not, you weren't doing a. No, it was supposedly fixed. It would run, and we finally sold it to somebody. And the guy came and got it with a flatbed because we're like, we're not spending another. And we kind of tried to tell him, and he looked at us like, "What? Okay, I don't care." And I was like, "All right,
Hey,
you're on your own, baby."
Live and learn. I gotta ask. In that episode, it showed the person playing you when they looked out the window and seen the spirit looking back at them. They screamed. Did you scream in real life when you seen the spirit?
One of the times, he was when he really, really saw it. One time he started. Oh, by the way, there was a time that I said, "Guess what? I'm not spending a night here anymore. I'm going home." So
yeah.
A couple of times he saw it come into his bedroom at the foot of his bed. In other words, this was ramping up. The appearances,
Just kept
ramping up,
escalating. Yeah,
and he was sleeping with his, and it was like, don't shoot at the thing because he had this huge widescreen TV mounted like in the bedroom. You're gonna ruin your TV.
Yeah,
Whatever you do, don't. But I was like, I'm not spending. No, thanks. Because one time, same thing. This was later in the evening. He had gone out for something. I can't remember. I'd fallen asleep on the sofa. There's this little half bathroom with a shower that was like right down the hallway. Because again, this was, like I said, older homes, even though it was renovated, this bathroom had a little window that looked out in the back area into that cement area. But again, since it was an older house, it was lifted up. In other words, you would have to be like 7 feet tall to be able to look in that window, in through the window from the outside.
Yeah.
The only thing I had out there was the washer and the dryer. I remember I was like half asleep and I'm like, I'm going to go to the restroom.
Right.
And I'm about to, and all of a sudden I looked up and below that window was the sink, the little bathroom sink. And there's that guy staring at me.
And you'd have to be a basketball player.
I mean, of course. And the thing is this was a small bedroom. It had one of those pocket doors, the ones you slide in and out.
Yeah.
I almost broke my nose trying to open that door because it wasn't like you could, you had to grab it and pull it into the wall.
Yeah.
I almost God, that was a bad feeling.
Because bet.
I was like, so we, like I said, it progressed to the point where, obviously, it wasn't bound at that time just to the vehicle. It wasn't.
Yeah. Right.
And he, like I said, I stopped staying there. And I mean, if he was coming over to my house, don't bring the car. Do not bring the car.
Here's the other thing. Looking back, why he was driving it, this guy was in the car with him.
Yeah, and that's the thing. He kind of started getting a little bit wigged out with it. And even that guy that was like, "Henry, man, I'm not going to work on your car anymore because there's something about your car.
Don't bring that car here no more."
He's like, "Man, I look, my guys are looking at me like real weird because I'm talking to them because I'm thinking somebody's standing behind me and there's nobody there. And they're looking at me like, what's wrong with him? He's talking to what?
Talking to himself.
To himself, And this was, let me tell you something, by the way, these are very like down-to-earth men that are like, yeah, whatever it is, man. No.
Right.
So,
also, Marlene, you were in an episode of Haunted Hospital, and there was a scene in there where they were telling your story where you were driving home, and you felt that something was in the back seat, so you're looking in your rearview mirror. Now, I got to ask, if you'd have seen something looking back at you, what would you have done?
I don't. Let me tell you, this is the thing. At that time, I used to work weekends and be on call. By the way, all these things, everything slows down on the weekend. People don't realize anything has to do with the government, with the hospital. Everything slows down. But because I would go into some areas, I did it across the board. But when you go into a lot of high risk areas in the city, you learn to be aware of
Your surroundings.
your surroundings. Believe it or not, I would even, of course, replaying all the horror movie scenarios.
Yeah.
I would always look like around like the back seat, even though it was like, in other words, but I was always like the door is locked, everything. But my point is that a lot of times I would be parked in a parking lot that was empty. His employees parking usually was on the other side of the building.
Right.
So I would be walking out there to an empty parking lot in
You
some of
were
these
a walking
locations.
cliche.
Yeah. And let me tell you, but still, and there, and I was a pretty calm person, but there were times in that little situation where I don't know, it's difficult to explain when you feel something that you're like, what in the world is going on? By the way, and this was that, that episode involved a child death.
Right.
All right. And I would, believe it or not, I can set anything aside. I was purely working on my job.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what is, I had already, see, this was when I had gone to the hospital to speak to personnel there, which is something I had to do as an investigator.
Right.
And they didn't have the paperwork, the report I needed ready. Because this had happened like early in the afternoon. And by the time I got there, it was like, I want to say 2 a.m. And I went over to the house, and that's when I started hearing since it was being treated as a crime scene for different reasons. The family wasn't there. It was empty. I had gotten a family member that lived like around the block. I said, look, I need to get in there, take pictures. And I remember that was when I started hearing stuff. They had a pool which figured in the death of the child. And this was, by the way, like a very small, what they call zero lot lines, which are houses with small yards. Like, in other words, there wasn't a place for people to hide or stuff to happen. You look and you got the neighbor's yard. This is about 3 a.m. Again, it's quiet. It's a residential.
Right. So if you're hearing somebody, you're going to see them.
Well, and I'm going around and I'm just taking pictures of everything. And I hear that splash and I'm like, what in the world is that? What could be splashing it? And I'm like, you're like, what? And for a minute, the first thing I thought is, how some people put those electronic cleaners in their pools? Those,
right.
there was nothing like that. I looked. That was the first tip off. And then when I went back to the emergency room, and then I went up, and then I did hear somebody upstairs. And I went upstairs. Because I was thinking, you know what? We're told to leave the house and there's somebody up there.
Right.
Again, I'm not thinking paranormal. They're not supposed to be up there. And I went up there and there was like 3 bedrooms and the bathrooms upstairs. And I went up there because I remember the way that house was when you came from the outside. It was the kitchen and the bedroom was, the floor was, it was right above, the bedrooms were right above the kitchen area. And I'm hearing like, somebody up. I went through everything. I opened closets. There was nothing. And then when I went back to the emergency room to pick up the paperwork from that they were supposed to have for me as to what happened when the child was received at ER and everything, I remember I walked up, and again, this place is empty. This is maybe now like 4:30 in the morning. And I see this guy in scrubs. I think he was either talking on the phone or smoking and I see this little kid, because by the way, the child, the way they portrayed in the show, he was much younger than that. He was only like 4 years old. Okay. And they made it look like he was an older child. He wasn't. He was very young. And I'm seeing this little kid standing next to this guy, and I'm like, what in the hell is this little kid doing? That rotunda where the ER paramedic vehicles pull in?
Yeah, 4 a.m.
4 a.m. What's this little kid doing out there? And I'm looking, and although it's not his kid, he looked like he was an employee or something, whatever.
Yeah.
And he's like, you could tell he doesn't see. I'm like, doesn't he? And then I'm thinking, okay, this kid got away from some parent that's in the waiting room.
Right.
Whatever. So I'm like ready to tell this guy, man, like, are you blind? Grab that kid. And he darted, those doors, they slide open automatically.
Yeah.
And I followed that kid in there. until I went into that waiting room that was one way in, one way out. And he wasn't in there. So I realized that. And then when I saw there was a picture of him, when they gave me the file, I realized that was the kid I had seen.
Wow, that had to be hair-raising when you see that picture. Also, Marlene,
yes,
hours of doing these things kind of amps up the little specter of it, doesn't it?
Well, people don't realize that it's not that it's not present when you see either it's a ghost. Yeah. Or something paranormal, but when you got movement, it's so difficult to discern it. Sometimes it is, so you don't. In other words, you overlook it. You might be actually seeing an apparition, and you take it for a real person, especially if it's solid. But again, when you have movement and noise and people coming and going, and you're busy, you just don't see it. But when all of that is not there, then you're like, and again, even despite being involved in paranormal work, I didn't go straight to paranormal. I went to, like I said, I thought, this little kid is running around and he's out here next to this part of dumb, donkey's butt. Why isn't he grabbing this little kid?
Right.
He's
this kid's lost. He's lost his parent. It's 4 a.m. at a hospital. Yeah, we need to get his parent. He looked like a lost kid. Also, you were taking a lot of pictures. I'm sure you did that all throughout. Did you ever catch any spirits in any of your pictures?
That in that particular was no, I didn't. That one in particular, no, I didn't. Sometimes I had a couple of times. Because normally I wouldn't take pictures of all the cases. Normally it was something like this, which involved a death of a child. When I would take pictures because, again, there was a parallel criminal investigation going on, and it's just handled more extensively. Normally, if it was just even though it was very serious, but if there was no child death, usually the only ones I would take maybe pictures of was maybe the child and an injury or something at the house or something, something that was there. Like a couple of times I will tell you, I did go into some locations, into some houses. Yeah. And I was like, what in the world is going on in here? Right. And it was like, wow. And again, you want to call it spiritual turbulence. And, I hate to say not all the time because stuff happens, but there were times where there was dysfunction in the household and you're not sure, like, what am I picking up here? And I've had it where you move into a place and it amps up the dysfunction, or it just makes people act out in different ways.
Very uncomfortable.
And they're basically being affected. I don't want to use the word possessed, but they are being affected by what may be transpired in that location.
Right.
Before.
Makes sense because there's a lot of cases and reports of this happening.
Yes.
One example, the Amityville Horror. Allegedly, that family moved in. They were there 28 days. Whatever was there was affecting them.
Well, let me tell you something. The dysfunction for the DeFeo family was pretty bad. All right, when you read into the history, I mean, ultimately, of course, look, it ended up in murder. But if you look, I mean, that was a family with significant problems, big time problems in them. Yeah. And I'm not sure how long they were living there, but they were there a little bit.
Well, yeah, that was the first family that had all the murders, and then the second family that came in, I think that was the
Lutzes. Yes,
they were only there 28 days. They left everything. They just left.
Right.
Things amped. What happened? What we've been talking about. Over 28 days, things kept amping up, and just it came to a peak, and they said, "Oh hell no, we got to get out of here,"
Well, and this is the thing. It makes you wonder: did this other family have something with them that when they all died? Because everybody thinks, well, the jumping off point is the death of all this family. What if there was something that was walking with them?
Right.
To begin with, this was, in other words, it got what it wanted. Whatever. If we could go into we're talking here demonic or malevolent or whatever.
And I always think some people got what I call spiritual baggage anyway.
Oh, yeah. But this is, I talk about the ultimate spiritual baggage. But whatever was there, like, is like, okay, I'll hang out here and wait for the next family that comes in.
And you know what else, Marlene? We're almost out of time, unfortunately. But you know what else? The spiritual baggage that somebody could be bringing in, mixing or intermingling with whatever's already there, that could be like oil and water.
Sure.
You know,
Yes.
no gas on a fire. You know what I'm
Yes, absolutely. People don't realize. And you know what, James? I've even had people that sometimes you know about it, sometimes you don't. I've had people that have used a bedroom that was used for a long time as a sick room. They develop symptoms, and there's sometimes you're not the real estate agent doesn't tell you.
No, because every state's different.
Well, and sometimes they're not forced to. I think they're forced to tell you, like, if there was a crime or something like that.
Yeah,
but
New York,
something like, hey, as far as, they'll say HIPAA law or something, but they'll won't say, you know what, there was a very sick person here that this was their bedroom for the last 2 or 3 years of their life before they passed. They don't.
Yeah.
They don't have to say that, especially if it was a natural, not questionable death. And I've had cases where people unknowingly, and then they start developing all these symptoms, and they just don't know and then somehow or other they do a little bit of research, whether they call back the real estate agent or a neighbor somehow.
Yeah.
And they find out that whoever used to occupy that room, it might be very nice and, painted and it looks beautiful. There was somebody that was very, very sick.
That's right. That
stayed there.
You know what, Marlene? It's been a real pleasure having you on. Unfortunately, we're almost out of time. Very nice chatting with you. Boy, the stuff you've experienced and investigated, and your husband, too.
No, yeah, I know. I've dragged him along into this, and he's like, okay, I'm going to be your wingman, I guess. And then, sometimes we go and he goes, I'll ride shotgun because God knows what you'll get yourself into.
Yeah, got it. Well, it's good to have somebody like that. God bless him. So anyway, Marlene, what would you like to share to my listeners?
Well, if, like I said, I have, you can go to mppelliser.com or miamighostchronicles.com. That's my website. On there, I have links to all my videos and so the podcast versions of them, whether it's like when, that you were kind enough to come and get interviewed by me on Stories of the Supernatural, and you can find that on like YouTube, BitChute, Rumble, Cloud Hub. And there's always a podcast-only version of all those interviews, but I also narrate stories like either Nightshade Diaries, like older stories, or Supernatural Storytime is like modern, more scary stories. And Eerie News, which is just weird stuff. God knows, like, when bodies are left in a tanning bed for 3 days. For 3 days.
I know.
Yeah, like that. So yes, but if you go to either mppelliser.com, erie.news, or miamighostchronicles.com, you're going to find links to everything there. And yes, it has been my pleasure to speak with you again, JC. It's been wonderful.
Well, thank you so much. And everybody, check out her website and her books and everything. And Marlene, I hope you and your husband have a great rest of the week.
Thank you. Likewise. Take care.
All righty. And everybody, make sure